So Donald Trump just steamrolled the one trading partner he thought he could bully. And for the first time in his political life, he blinked. But here's the thing, the damage is already done. We are watching the collapse of a tough guy tariff stunt that was doomed from the start. The White House operated on the arrogant assumption that Canada would fold. They banked everything on the idea that fear alone would force Ottawa to beg and back down. But guess what? That gamble has backfired. Instead of submission, Trump has been met with a wall of cold, hard competence, and it has exposed his operation as chaotic, unprepared, and lost. It's honestly hard to believe he thought this would work. We are talking about a critical partner, not a disposable pawn in one man's ego trip. This isn't just about lumber. We are talking about the United States proving to the world that its word no longer means anything. Let me fill you in on what's been happening. So let's look at the setup here. Trump returned to power carrying resentment like fuel. He wasn't interested in managing the economy. He wasn't interested in stability. He needed a public fight that looked like control, sounded like dominance, and fed the fantasy that America first meant someone else had to bleed. He didn't have numbers. He didn't have a coherent strategy. Trump had instinct. Trump had grievance. Trump had a base condition to cheer whenever an ally was treated like an enemy and chaos was rebranded as strength. To activate that base, he needed a target that felt safe to attack. Not because that target suddenly broke the rules, not because something new had happened, but because the optics were perfect, close enough to hit, familiar enough to demonize. Canada wasn't chosen because Canada was wrong. Canada was chosen because Trump thought Canada would bend. Whether it was tearing up agreements he signed himself, or threatening partners who follow the rules, or demanding loyalty disguised as cooperation, the behavior never changed. He threatens first, he demands submission next. He humiliates publicly if he doesn't get instant obedience. But this time, the assumption collapsed. They knew he would return. They knew he would escalate. And they built a response designed to absorb his noise and strip it of power. No panic, no theatrical counterattacks, no frantic attempts to soothe his ego, just preparation, coordination, and a refusal to play the role Trump scripted for them. So Trump raised the stakes, expecting Ottawa to rush in with concessions to offer something symbolic he could parade on television as a win. He treated it like every other Trump confrontation, pressure until the other side cracks, then declare victory. Canada didn't crack. Canada didn't posture. Canada responded like a system that had already mapped the fallout and identified where pressure actually hurts the White House. Calm moves, quiet signals, targeted resistance, and suddenly Trump, who thrives on fear, ran into the one thing his style can't overpower: discipline. And while Trump performed strength for the cameras, the consequences landed on people who never get a microphone. Shifts quietly reduced, orders quietly delayed, overtime quietly cut. Workers felt it before politicians admitted it. That's how these fights always end, not with slogans, but with paychecks caught between reckless politics and a trade war nobody needed. At first glance, this looks like just another clash of personalities. But if you zoom out, a very specific pattern snaps into focus. One figure entered Trump's orbit with loyalty and restraint, defending him publicly and believing the chaos could be managed. There was faith that proximity would bring influence, that staying inside the circle meant protecting the institution from its worst impulses. Then came the moment of truth, when a line appeared that couldn't be crossed without breaking the law or shattering basic norms. The answer was no, and that was enough. Trump didn't negotiate, he detonated. The public attack started immediately, the insults escalated, and loyalty was redefined as betrayal overnight. The message was clear: loyalty to Trump supersedes loyalty to the law. And then it happened again. Another ally stepped forward, steady and disciplined, convinced that professionalism could coexist with Trump's theatrics. They showed up, prepared, did the work, and tried to shield the system from his impulses. Then the demand came, not loudly at first, but insistently, asking for something that crossed an ethical boundary. The refusal was calm. The response was not. Trump turned instantly, unleashing public humiliation, isolation, and political exile as punishment for restraint. The message was clear: Loyalty to Trump supersedes loyalty to the law, and the pattern repeated. A third time, the setup looked different, but the mechanics were identical. Good faith at the start, public defense when criticism mounted, a belief that the institution mattered more than the man. Then the pressure point arrived, the moment when Trump demanded absolute obedience, not competence, not caution, but submission. When that demand was denied, the destruction followed with brutal efficiency. Smears replaced trust. Enemies were manufactured overnight. The message was clear. Loyalty to Trump supersedes loyalty to the law. Once you see this pattern, it becomes impossible to unsee. Anyone who refuses to cross the line is disposable. And that is the rule governing power inside Trump's world. This is where the moral inversion fully locks in. An ally that followed the rules is suddenly treated as an enemy, not because it cheated, but because it refused to break its own system to serve Trump's political needs. Cooperation becomes defiance. Discipline becomes hostility, and obedience to law is recast as an attack on American strength. On one side, you have a partner clinging to process, documentation, and the boring mechanics of agreements that were designed to prevent exactly this kind of abuse. On the other side, you have Trump treating those same rules as disposable the moment they stop producing applause. These aren't foreign rules. These are American-built rules, and Trump's response to them is vandalism when they don't bend fast enough. Markets and businesses don't respond to slogans. They freeze, they hesitate, they wait. Plans get shelved, hiring slows, contracts go quiet. Let that sink in. This isn't panic driven by an enemy. This is anxiety generated by the White House itself. And that matters. This is where Trump's most fragile brand takes a direct hit. The economic strongman, the deal maker who supposedly controls outcomes through sheer force of will. But strength doesn't create volatility. Incompetence does. And here, the risk is coming from inside the building. Trump didn't expose a weakness abroad. He manufactured instability at home. And now he's boxed in. There's no clean exit. If Trump escalates, the damage compounds. Businesses recoil. Donors get nervous. Voters feel the cost. The chaos spreads, and the political price tags pile up fast. If Trump backs down, the mask slips. The bluff is exposed. The base sees retreat, not strategy. The strongman fantasy collapses under its own noise. There is no third option, no graceful pivot, no hidden win waiting off stage. And inside the Republican Party, the fracture deepens. The business wing wants predictability. MAGA Republicans want spectacle. The remaining moderates are trapped between loyalty tests and economic reality. Nobody can move without angering someone. So the party stalls, locked in place, watching a manufactured crisis grind forward with no off-ramp in sight. This is the point where the system is forced to intervene, not because it wants to, but because it has to. A real institution steps forward, not to argue politics, not to trade insults, but to draw a hard boundary and say this is crossed out of the realm of performance. This is no longer a shouting match. This is a question of whether rules still apply when a president decides they are inconvenient. Trump reacts exactly as expected. He reaches for executive power and stretches it to its breaking point. He wraps aggression in the language of urgency. He frames bypassing Congress as efficiency. He sells unilateral action as leadership. Oversight becomes obstruction. Law becomes delay. And anyone who resists is accused of undermining America itself. That's the inversion. That's the trick. For a long time, courts have been reluctant to interfere when presidents invoke emergencies or economic threats. Deference has been the habit. Silence has been the shield. But this time, the justification is too naked. The reasoning is too thin. When power is asserted without discipline, the ritual politeness fades and scrutiny begins. Slowly, deliberately. Let that sink in. What Trump didn't count on is who starts pushing back. Not just political opponents, not just critics, but conservative legal voices who understand exactly what's at stake. This isn't about liking Trump or hating him. It's about whether any future limit survives once this maneuver is normalized. When authority detaches from accountability, ideology stops mattering. Structure does. At the heart of this clash is a constitutional fault line: executive speed versus legislative consent, personal will versus institutional restraint. If a president can do this here under this pretext, then no area of governance is protected. The precedent doesn't disappear when Trump leaves. It waits. And the consequences bleed inward. Confidence erodes quietly. Long-term decisions freeze. Businesses hesitate. Voters feel instability before they ever hear it explained. Trust doesn't collapse in one moment. It thins, it frays, and the cost accumulates without drama. So the real question isn't whether Trump can muscle through this episode. It's whether the presidency itself emerges intact if this kind of overreach is allowed to stand.